So hello there. I guess I will put some gaming. So hello there. I guess I will put some gaming. So, okay. Just something is happening while we talk. Actually, I can do experimental. I haven't watched it in quite some time. All right. Let's like slow it down to like ×2. And let's start the talk. So, probably starting from Drake's. Although I don't know if I'm not too fast, because I don't see many people here yet. However, well, it will be recorded anyway. Okay, it's elves vs elves. Reroll. I forgot to put like mirror match. No mirror, and I guess that's everything else is fine. Oh, I know what, not campaign. Alright, okay, it should be fine. Let's go. And there is Dwarf and Drakes. Good. So, starting from Drakes, because they are like first in the alphabetical order. And who is next? Like first is obviously Drakes versus Drakes, which is a mirror matchup. And honestly, it's kind of, well, not very much. I would say it's like somewhat okay, but it turns to basically like kind of clasher spam, so that's a problem there. Although Saurian Arbor is kind of alright, but yeah, like that's not very reliable, let's just say. Perhaps I will put kind of the sound down a bit. Sound effects a bit more, like this. And that's basically about it. All Drakes are beaten by Clasher except for Clasher. And then Saurians are actually not terrible, but yeah. Like there is no use of basically... You can try for Fighter Rabin, but that's about it. There aren't too many things that happen there. That's like one of the kind of typical Drake versus Drake moments where they actually don't do all that hot. But that's kind of typical for mirror matchups. They often lead to just one unit spams, and that's something I would like to fix, I guess, if I had time and resources. But that's lower in priority than stuff like, for example, actual balance between different factions. Because like there aren't really many mirror matchups that are being played. Usually they are being played by players who who are new and aren't as engaged with the community as older MP players that play a lot. Let's just say it like that. And the next would be, I guess we can discuss Undead. So that would be Drakes versus Undead. And there a lot happens, but basically if we look at this a bit from perspective, Adept beats nearly everyone. Or even everyone. The closest match is Adept versus Drake Fighter. And that's, in my opinion, in favor of Adept. Drakes have the mobility, they can go over water, however that's like not actually that great, and the drakes that actually fly kind of suffer to Ghost, because Ghost is alright, unless there is Burner. And the Burner is probably the... Honestly, I could see Burner being the best unit that actually drakes have against Undead, with exception of Adept. Yeah, with exception of Adept, for whom the best Drake unit would be Fighter, right? So that's not so hot. So basically, what would need to happen, and that would change the way the matchup is played quite a bit, right? If actually Burner is somewhat weaker towards like skeletal / ghoul units, I don't see Ghost ever being weaker to Burner happening. So basically skeletal units would need to be kind of stronger against Burner, and then other drakes would need to kind of compensate, especially Fighter would need to get somewhat buffed against like Adept, against like... Actually, like Fighter basically loses to everything with exception of Ghoul, so like Fighter would actually need to become stronger versus Adept and something else, I guess. While Burner is like kind of weaker versus all the Undead with exception of Adept. And in my opinion that could kind of work there. So there are like changes to these two units, or we can change Undead. Because like for now I'm talking from perspective of drakes exclusively. I probably will kind of approach this matchup from the other perspective later on, when I will talk about like Undead versus drakes, which is similar but not the same. I guess it mostly depends on my mindset, right? Right now, like, I'm listing the matchups drakes versus, and later I will list the matchups of Undead versus. I guess that's fine, because later on I can rewatch the stream and actually see how different ideas I had when talking about it from one and the other perspective. Obviously, probably there are many like correct answers, however I don't expect to see them all at once. So yeah, obviously like Saurians are completely off the table, which makes the Drake roster kind of even more limited than usual. Glider isn't like super hot topic, and also, although he deals with the skeletons and the ghoul, but he's very vulnerable to like Adept and Ghost. So that's how it looks like there. So actually I think that Glider is fine, and Glider doesn't need any changes in this matchup. Drake Burner is very kind of oppressive with having only one counter, and if Drake Burner lost that one counter, which is Adept, it would probably be a bad news for Undead, in my opinion. Not really counting on... Okay. And the game has ended, so let's get a new one in queue. Maybe this time on like Alan's far courtyard, and we can go with like usual AI. Okay. Coming back to the topic, Drake Burner is a type of unit that would be very oppressive if not for Adept, and the fact that Adept counters it. is actually kind of positive for the matchup right now. However, if Adept stopped countering Drake Burner, Drake's excluding here, which is kind of important, because Undead have the rush advantage. However, they don't have so much of a starting gold advantage as Northerners have, right? So, if we kind of exclude that, which isn't a lot, it's way less of an advantage of first rush than Northerners have. Drakes would basically have clear path to victory in this matchup, right? Which is also not good because like single unit spams aren't good in any matchup. It's simply not that fun. Clasher actually dies to like every like to skeletons, to ghost, to adept, and only beats ghoul. And ghoul is basically beaten by everything except for Saurians, and Saurians are beaten by everything else. So that's not very hot either. And then Drake Fighter, which is quite fine. That's basically the best adept counter you can get. However, it doesn't do very hot against skeletons. Actually, it is fine versus melee skeleton. Quite a bit worse against range skeleton. And also doesn't do great against ghost, which is another unit that only burner counters, right? So yeah, here, as I said, what I could do is to buff Drake Fighter against Adept in particular, and perhaps a bit versus like Ghost, and then kind of nerf Drake Burner as well, perhaps not versus Adept, but like versus some other unit. However, I expect that this would slow down the game kind of significantly, right? So it wouldn't be the same dynamic anymore. Alright, and like my throat is a bit sore. I did a call out yesterday, so I will take a sips quite often. I guess I also have to like think a bit more about what I will talk about, just to say less. Next swap would be dwarves. And here here actually we see the okay. What I think about this matchup is that currently Thunderer is actually beating all the Drakes, right? From Fighter to Glider. But Thunderer doesn't beat Saurians, right? Okay, let's queue up another game. Or maybe we can see if there is anything in like multiplayer worth watching. Doesn't really seem like it. Not really any games going on. Oh, they finished the Igor League. Interesting. Let's do Fallen Star Shrine. This one? Yeah, let's try this one. Let's see what happens. Coming back to Dwarf versus Drakes. However, except for Thunderer, Fighter is also fine unit. Fighter actually like does fight not as well as Thunderer against Fighter and Clasher. However, Fighter beats actually every unit. Actually doesn't beat every unit. Beats Burner, Glider and Skirmisher in my opinion. But slightly loses to Fighter, Clasher and Augur. It is kind of more better all around unit. Here. Meanwhile, Thunder is kind of very polarized between Drakes and Saurs. Guard does surprisingly well against most units. Actually, that's kind of not true, now that I think about it. He again does alright against Drakes, however not against Saurs. And then we have Wolfsarker who, well, acts as expected here. Loses against melee units, wins against ranged units. Very hard counter towards Augur. And then we come to the Outlaw ports, where Footpad is kind of not great anywhere, basically. Doesn't do great in this matchup. Thief who doesn't beat Fighter and Clasher, but does beat everything else. Actually he does not do... Actually yeah, he's kind of fine against Augur as well. Poacher who only beats Burner and Glider, and the Griffon Rider who beats everything again except for Fighter and Clasher. So, actually in a perfect world I want one more counter to Fighter and Clasher that is also countered by either like Burner, Glider or Saurians. And then the matchup is, in my opinion, better, because right now, if you don't use Thunderer, I expect that you won't reach against opponent of the same skill 50% win ratio, unless you are using Thunderer, in which case you can possibly do that. But it is still not guaranteed. You will probably be kept close to like 53%. And then we have Loyalists. And basically Loyalists... Spearman beats everything except Saurians. Again, that's kind of how it goes with Pierce units here. He sucks as usual. In fact, like, it doesn't do great against pretty much... It only does do great against Skirmisher, right? Cavalryman beats Augur and Glider, but not anything else. Bowman beats Glider and Burner, but not anything else. Fencer beats... Actually, Fencer does beat both Burner and Glider and Saurians. However, Augur is kind of exploiting the high dodge there. Horseman again does beat ranged units, but doesn't beat melee units. Typical... Yeah, actually Horseman and Wolfsarker are kind of similar on that matter, right? Then we have Fish and Mage who beats Saurians but not Drakes, obviously. So, what I think could happen in this matchup? Generally there are two ways this is played. Either in heavy... heavy Saurians, or like kind of 50-50, like when you play kind of evenly between Drakes and Saurians. So, it would be nice if one more Drakes countered Spearman, and then we could move on from like actual Saurian spawns, because that would be no longer necessary. However, there kind of needs to be a unit other than Spearman that does beat and Merman, because like I can't count Merman in like the factional balance, because Merman is useful only on some maps, essentially, like, and only on water. On land, like, sucks. So what changes could I propose here? Like in the previous matchups, actually I would rather go through all the factions and then propose changes, because every change actually affects all the factions. So that's something. So that would be basically Loyals. Spearman beats everything except for Saurians, and honestly, with how little difference there I think is between Saurian Skirmisher and Augur. Actually, Skirmisher is only like... only because of Skirmisher Drakes can play like they play. Otherwise, like, you could just go Spearman, and even with possibly few mages, and that's it. Possibly Fencer. I don't really see Cavalryman there, honestly. And that's about it. Because it's true that Spearmans do beat Drakes. If Drakes go like 50-50 in my opinion. Like, you can just go pure Spearman. Possibly. With maybe Mage to take care of Skirmishers, and that's it. I will put it on slower speed actually, because the games end too fast anyway. Actually, we can do the same map again. I guess it's nice to look at while I talk. So continuing to Elves. In my opinion, this is the first truly problem matchup, where there is no solution that is already possible. What do I mean by that? By that I mean that basically if you take Fighter and Clasher, they will currently I'm missing a word. Okay, maybe I will just use different one. Basically, right now, if you just take Drake Fighter, or kind of a bit more Drake Clasher, they just counter all units that Elves have, that Rebels have, right? So, the closest one, it is not by huge margin, but nonetheless, it is by tiny margin. That means that basically you can go with just fighters and just fighters, in my opinion, and you will achieve good results, and you can just add augurs there just to be, because augurs are generally good, and then that could kind of work out. That's everything you need basically. And basically elves can't really reach 50% win rate. You are probably reaching like 44 point, no, around 40, maybe a bit more, like, yeah, not 44, like 47 probably, 48, 49, something along these lines. However, that's assuming that basically you play perfectly, and you also are locked into single unit, because like, who is your best counter towards this everything? Fighter. And that's probably one of the things that I kind of dislike about elves, because they don't have any resistances, so if you come across a matchup like that, you don't necessarily have unit that could be your savior, and with better play, you can't necessarily change the result. I mean, you can always, but not to such extent, right? You can't outplay your opponent on like tactical level. or rather on strategical level, you can always outplay opponent on tactical level. And then we have orcs. And here we have similar story to rebels. However, where just like Clasher and Fighter beat everything that orcs have. However, orcs that go for Grand Rush start with like 14 additional gold in unit strength, right? And they start with night bonus, and they get villages, and that changes the map completely, and they then can push you with power and economy on their side. And then you basically, only with having these units being countered to absolutely everything, you can actually recover from that. If they weren't the counter, because yeah, Fighter and Clasher will beat every unit that orcs have, and Fighter by quite some extent, while Clasher is somewhat close matchup against Archer, actually. And yeah, that's basically it. So we basically have to have Drake, Fighter and Clasher be somewhat OP against the entire faction, just to deal with like the pressure that is applied there in the early game. However, if the Drakes had even one unit that is actually not overly mobile, good at holding villages, then the matchup would flip completely towards Drakes the same second. And if that unit was chaotic, it would be over, and the entire matchup would need to be rebalanced, right? So that's the current state of this matchup. It's probably still orc favored, despite the units being completely in favor of Drakes, just because of economy and because of knight advantage. And finally we have Drakes against Dunefolk. And what can I say? Burner just beats Saurians, completely expected. Herbalist similarly. Actually, I should check one thing, just to see. Okay. Okay. Alright. Rider is just good scout, it's finder. Rover is useful. However, Rover is... Of course I will. What do you mean I won't? Of course I will. Thanks for increasing the view range, by the way. Oh, so nice, increasing the chat. Also, I really welcome any comments. That they're great, no matter what they are, they're great. So thanks for ranges. Okay, coming back to the topic. Rover is actually decent versus Drakes, however, in my opinion, he loses slightly. Then we have Burner and the Glider, who he wins slightly, and against Saurians he again loses slightly. Meanwhile, problem here is Dune Soldier, who in my opinion is simply too oppressive in this matchup, not Rover. It's actually a Soldier, in my opinion, who is too oppressive, and his closest matchup is actually Burner, so that's nice. Yeah, that's nice because like Rover counters the Burner, however that's a problem. So that will be balanced. However, here is kind of an important thing I would like to mention. That Dunefolk I won't be considering Dunefolk while balancing other factions here. the Unfolk will live in their like own separate space of balance. And then we have Skirmisher, who is actually quite nice unit in this matchup, in my opinion. However, she loses to Saurians, which is alright. Honestly, that's alright, and that's just nice how it works. Or how do I say it in other words? It's actually like nicely and then Naga just is water unit, so I won't discuss water units too deeply. Okay. So yeah, Drakes in my opinion are kind of problematic in some places. However, they are kind of tough to change, and if I were to change them, I would mostly focus on actually versus undead matchup, while leaving the versus rebel matchup towards the rebel side. Because that's also kind of problematic from rebel side, because if you just buff fighter enough, or even a bit, he basically will become kind of problematic against the whole faction, because he counters literally everything except for fighter and clasher. So what changes could I actually make here? Let's first think about actually kind of switching the buff that was made a while ago, I believe in 1.16. That was minus 40% cold resistance to Drake Burner. In my opinion, that can be switched for fighter, so that fighter is simply stronger counter to the adept, instead of Burner being stronger counter to the adept. Alright? And that would already open up a path where you can actually do something. And I know that players kind of... There are differing opinions on this, and the kind of maps have a lot to say. However, in my opinion, that is a change that would be for good in this matchup, where Drake Burner actually during the day deals perfectly well with everything, and really only thing that is kind of problematic is the adept. That would actually create a unit that is in this matchup counter to the adept. So we simply have we gain an counter against adept that is direct counter, that is Drake Fighter, who is actually not so decent against like skeletons and decent but still losing, right? Like decent but losing against skeletons and ghost, much less against ghosts than skeletons, but still. And then fighter actually having winning matchup against adept, alright? And Drake Burner having winning matchup against everything except for adept, which in my opinion is actually some path forward. Clasher in this matchup is... I can see why Clasher is being used, however, what I don't kind of see why this unit is used is the fact that Clasher is basically countered by everything. Clasher does lose against Skeleton Archer, does lose against a Skeleton, does lose against Ghost, only wins against the Ghoul, but no one makes Ghoul versus Drakes, right? So yeah. That's kind of my take on this at the moment. So, first change would be, I will maybe start noting that. Hmm. So that's the first change. Minus 50% cold resistance for Drake Burner, minus 40% for Drake Fighter. What else could be done to improve this matchup? Possibly Glider could be also given the treatment. Perhaps Clasher could get that. However, I don't think that would change a lot, right? Actually, it does change quite a bit. It almost makes him viable there. So yeah, that's something that could be done. Minus 40% for Fighter and Clasher, 50% for Burner. The Drake Burner could also receive a small change on how the unit is priced and how much HP it has. I could go with making Burner a bit stronger, because there is room for that, right? In no faction, Drake Burner actually dominates hard, and actually he, like in mirror matchup, obviously he loses basically against everything, except for... Yeah, the Drake Burner in mirror matchup loses against everything, except for himself. Is there a place where this could be problematic? Versus Dwarf, like, Drake Burner actually also loses against most things, surprisingly enough. However, there is a place for Drake Burner anyway, right? There are some units that are Drake Burner can actually take care of against some units that better than other units, so there is still place. However, this unit isn't like exceptional in this matchup. Versus Loyalists, well, Spearmen. There again are units that Drake Burner does deal. However, it's mostly negative matchup. Honestly, that's mostly negative matchup. Then we have Orcs, which again, like, actually here Drake Burner is very decent. Still losing to the Archer, however, and still losing to the Grunt, beating most of the other units though. Versus Elves, this could be a problem. This is like first faction where this could be a problem. Against Dunefolk this won't be a problem at all. I don't even have to consider them. So actually, let's just see. Let's just see. Actually, no, I don't think that will be problematic. Like, Fighter will deal with that anyway, Archer will deal with that anyway. That's slight. Other units were losing already. So it's not like a lot will change. So that's actually a fine change. That can be done. There still will be losses against the same units. However, what's important for me here is the slight increase in the Dwarf matchup, where the unit actually becomes a bit better. The slight increase in the Undead matchup, and like most importantly here is increase in versatility of Drake Burner for me, right? because this unit is simply not very versatile at 21 gold, and that 1 gold less would actually make him kind of easier to recruit. So that's another change that simply is targeted at increasing versatility of the faction. Next up, I don't think I want to do anything with Glider, he is fine as he is. And then I also don't think I want to do anything with Samurians at this moment. We will see if I lack anything by the end of this. Okay, let's queue up another game. I'm already talking about like one faction and it's already 40 minutes. Again, nothing. Oh, let's not disturb with the people. Let's just like queue up another game here. Also, we can try to do like beating campaigns with AI challenge or something. Okay, but that would be Drakes. Next up are Undead. And honestly, when it comes to Undead, I'm targeting one unit in particular, and that's Ghoul. I don't think like most of the other units actually like need strong nerfs or buffs. But there is Ghoul. And the Ghoul is simply performing the same role that every unit in Undead is already performing. Which basically is being a tank against Blade and Pierce, and Cold, and a bit Fire. So that's one thing, and in my opinion that simply decreases the viability of the unit, right? Obviously this unit won't be like great against Drakes, no matter what I do. In fact, probably will be even worse. However, versus other factions, especially impact factions, and here especially targeting rebels, it might actually be quite nice. So that's basically what I'm targeting right now. So we can basically skip Drakes already, we kind of talked about this, and I don't think I want to change anything from the perspective of Undead in this match. Then we have the Mirror, and I will skip the Mirror as well. If there are resources, I will take care of that, but if there are not, then tough luck. Next up, Dwarves. And here, well, there is not really much to say. Except for one. Actually, there is probably more to say than I think. Because there are units, that's kind of interesting matchup overall. I had to think a bit. In the end, how it works right now is that Drake Fighter, the Dwarf Fighter, does do very good job against everything except for Ghost. And yeah, Dwarf Fighter does beat Skeleton Archer, does beat Ghoul, does even beat Adept, right? So basically in this matchup the Ghost is the key, and I don't think anyone will disrupt this point, right? Or argue with it. Then we have Thunder Air, which is not very useful. Guard, who is again not very useful. However, there is a place for Guard. Wolfsucker, which is very useful, as it basically beats most of the units that Undead have. Right? With exception of Skeleton, and depending on time of day Ghost. And then we have Footpad, who actually is quite useful against anything except for Dark Adept Ghost, and that's about it. So we kind of can see where the problem units start to arise. And then we have Thief, who is kind of fine against non-skeletal units, and there is Poacher, who is not very good, and then is Griffin Rider, who is actually fine against most units except for skeletal again. So, in my opinion, in this place, we have one unit that is problematic, and that is the Dwarf Fighter, and then we have another approach to it from the other side where the Ghost is also the problem. So we have two problem units. Unit number one is Dwarvish Fighter, who basically beats everyone if there is no Ghost. And then there is Ghost, who beats basically everyone. However, Ghost has some counters, but not very strong ones. Thief is actually a Ghost counter, believe it or not, and Thief with Backstab actually does do enough damage to offset the healing, and because of elusive movement type, the healing is also like lower, so like actually Thief does do a good job, and Wolfsucker also does a good job. However, all of that is like kind of tricky, right? This isn't like, how do I say it? This isn't like straightforward counters, right? Okay, so blue one. Let's perhaps try this one map next. I won't even bother changing the gold. So, basically we live in a world where both units are problematic, however, the Dwarf Fighter is more problematic. And here is where Ghoul could technically come in. for now leaving the impact resistance aside. By the way, I will later on just show the whole document with changes that we discussed so far. Also, if you have your own comments, please share them. That's no problem at all. So coming up, no, well, this matchup is kind of difficult to discuss as well. The Ghoul would need quite a bit of changes in order to beat Dwarf Fighter, actually. Right? Probably like 30% blade resistance or something like that. That's quite a high number, honestly. To even like start to compete there. And then, because Dwarf Fighter actually has both attacks, aka both blade and impact, you can always choose the better one. So in order to make Ghoul viable there, you need like crazy amount of resistances. Right? That's not even close. Honestly, I think that Wesnoth animations look better on like ×2 speed. So in order to create a counter for Dwarf Fighter that is not a ghost, you actually have to really do a lot here. Like really a lot. And it's not like I can change easily Dwarf Fighter anyway. Because other factions also rely on impact and blade interaction. So yeah. That's where the problems start. However, we can try something else. Alright. What would happen if we gave Ghoul parry? 10% melee parry. That does help immensely, actually. That does help you a lot. However, I can't just give Ghoul parry for nothing, right? Actually, let's think about the results of giving Ghoul parry. First, against the Drakes, Ghoul starts to beat Clasher. That's kind of funny. Ghoul actually has positive matchup against Clasher, positive matchup against Glider, and retains the positive matchup against Saurians. That's an interesting change. Like, really. Mirror matchup? Nope. Dwarves. Yeah, Ghoul gains a lot. However, for what is the question? If we just take the parry, Ghoul is already kind of... Ghoul doesn't fit in the playstyle of Undead, however, as a unit itself it's quite strong. So just granting Ghoul additional, basically 6%, yeah, around like 10% melee parry is around like 3.6% dodge, and that's quite a big power increase for this unit, right? Quite a big power increase. Honestly, I could even see like decreasing the melee damage. Like, however, that doesn't do a lot because Ghoul already relies on like poison so much, right? Actually, that could be an option though. Decrease the melee attack of Ghoul, relying on poison much more, decrease the vulnerability to melee units. That is a niche that could be explored. He could also pay with like minus 10% parry against ranged, but let's not go there for now. Actually, I wonder if I could like add additional scene for like notepad to this. Is it visible or not? Okay, it doesn't seem. Okay. Right, so these are the changes for now. They should appear soon on the screen. And then we can see how change the resistances would actually help or make it worse. However, I'm possibly not very keen on like actually that mostly stops the poison, the regeneration from taking effect. However, that also like decreases the ghoul node power, so it like you don't need ghoul in order to deal poison damage that ghoul already inflicted. So it basically increases the reliance of ghoul on poison. Which we will see how it works, honestly. Second thing is the change in resistances from 30% pierce to 30% impact. And that honestly creates from ghoul a counter to footpad in versus dwarves, right? So that's something nice. However, footpad is already countered by adept. However, that's still kind of problematic sometimes. Like, the footpad is still good in that matchup. You can probably just spam footpad and wolf in the end and take that off because Berserker is such strong adept counter. Second. So you can't really count on adept working against footpad because footpad will simply like deal with deal with skeletons, and then Berserker deals with everything else, essentially, except for Ghost during sometimes. And now, despite Ghoul being weak to most things, there is a possibility to use Ghoul. And here actually decreasing melee is problematic, because Ghoul becomes weaker against Wolf. So that's suboptimal. However, yeah, that's kind of alright if the melee is there. However, now I have to find some other venue and I can like actually use the... I have to find another place when I can actually nerf the Ghoul. Because nothing is free in this world, neither are stats. Alright. And parry 10% is actually pretty substantial. That would probably... I would probably need to put the Ghoul at 17%, at 17 gold. With that. Then he's kind of decent against Wolf. Not really winning, but kind of decent. Probably winning on like good defense, right? But not, no, still negative against Wolf overall. And then does the Ghoul loses to anything else? Yes, in fact, Ghoul now loses against the Dwarf Thunderer, which I find quite funny. Because now Ghoul has no pierce resistance whatsoever, so Thunderer is suddenly decent against the Ghoul. That's quite funny. Funnily enough, Thunderer is also somewhat counter to Ghost, in a way that I believe 2 shots from Thunderer kill the Ghost. Which now, if Thunderer would be Ghoul counter, right? You can see actually more Thunderers, you can actually counter the Ghost with Thunderer. I find that hilarious for some reason. Like you change one thing and suddenly there is that cascade effect that changes everything else, right? Which I find like really quite funny, honestly. At least for me that's fun, right? Observing this and looking at this. Because as soon as you remove the 30% of pierce from Ghoul and shift it to impact, instantly Thunderer becomes a counter. Instantly. And because the Ghoul presence in the matchup overall would probably increase, because now Ghoul counters the units that are most... Ghoul is better at countering the units that are most ungreat to play against. 400. The presence of Ghoul increases. However, Ghoul is still kind of a bit away from being actually great unit in the matchup. Like, even though Ghoul is no better, it's still kind of far away. I actually... I could possibly also shift the blade resistance to pierce resistance. However, I don't know if I want to do that yet. Requires further analysis. However, for some time now I wanted to give Ghoul quite high pierce impact resistance. So yeah, that's something. And then, what else could I do? Like, Thief will still kill Ghoul right now. Griffon still kills Ghoul right now. Wolf Circle still counters Ghoul, Footpad no longer counters Ghoul. Poacher now counters Ghoul. Interestingly enough, right? With 0% pierce units counter Ghoul, especially ranged ones. Because right now, Ghoul got the parry. Ghoul is kind of weak against ranged units, especially ranged pierce units. However, Ghoul still doesn't beat Dwarf Fighter. But actually getting Ghoul to beat Dwarf Fighter is like insane investment. Even for here. However, how does that change affect other matchups? Well, Ghoul arguably, rather for sure, became worse against Drakes. However, Ghoul was already bad against Drakes, so that doesn't really matter. Against Loyalists, Ghoul is now hard countered by Spearmen. However, now Ghoul counters Heavy Infantrymen. Yeah. Cavalryman is actually like... on the verge. Bowman now counters Ghoul. Fencer is almost countered. Horseman is no hard counter to Ghoul. Like, yeah, I guess for Loyalists that is actually like good change. As long as Heavy Infantryman is bad, right? If Heavy Infantryman is good, it actually becomes kind of better. Second, please. I have to respond to something. Let me quit this game anyway, since we are not watching it anymore. But I will leave the soundtrack on in a second. Because we in Wesnoth have very nice soundtrack, so it would be a waste to not listen to it. Okay, nice music in the background. Perhaps I should also start noting like the stuff I'm talking about. However, there isn't like any crazy movement, so I'm slowly working my way through everything, every unit. So in order to make like Ghoul better against Loyalists, I definitely would need more pierce resistance. Next up would be Orcs. Actually, I didn't even talk about this faction and I'm already like considering the effects of a change. Perhaps that's like more entertaining way to do this. Because like versus Orcs, Ghoul still loses to like Grunt. Archer is now a counter to Ghoul. However, Troll actually starts losing to Ghoul. Which is actually kind of nice change in my opinion. It does help in this matchup, in my opinion again. Ghoul now has like 2 counters that are alright, and kind of does alright against many units, and has some like harder counters like, oh, let's not kid ourselves, like Assassin is kind of screwed against like undead overall. Anyway. So I do like this change against orcs, right? Actually making it slightly better for undead. Not like game-changingly. Actually, it's kind of nice because it's kind of game-changingly because now you can use ghoul. Because previously, I believe that the troll wasn't, like the ghoul wasn't actually good against, yeah. The ghoul does, without the impact resistance, the ghoul basically is useless for against troll. Well, it's only like good against like against the regeneration. You can stop the regeneration, but that's about it. Ghoul doesn't do well against troll. Alright. And then we have Orcish Grunt and Archer, which are both now like... Orcish Grunt is probably a weaker counter, however Orcish Archer is now actually quite a good counter. If this changes with parry and everything go live, and probably in order to like pay for that there is also like +1 gold thrown in. Because like you can't just like give that much power and then not nerf the unit. And then we look at rebels, and Ghoul actually starts to counter Goose. However, every other unit actually counters Ghoul more, especially that's visible for like Archer. Which is actually kind of interesting. I kind of like this interaction now for many matchups, that pierce dealing units actually do deal with Ghoul quite well now, while the Ghoul counters the typical counters for undead. And you can actually use the Ghoul to like fend off Woos, which previously was only countered by Ghost. Especially in late game scenarios there was like no counter against Woos except for Ghost. And the Ghost was heavily countered by Mage. So now you get a unit. Actually, Ghoul actually does do better, does do kind of fine against Mage as well. So that's nice. However, Ghoul is basically countered by everything else in Elvish roster. I mean, the 10% parry certainly probably helps against fighter anyway, so that's a good change in my opinion. Like, it does increase the use rate for sure. It does make the matchup more interesting. And then we look at Dunefolk briefly, and they're basically Ghoul only counters here Ballist, and that's it. Nothing else. Everything else, it's Ghoul alive. Whether it is Skirmisher, Dirkfang, whatever you pick, it will eat Ghoul. So actually I like that change quite a bit. And there is additional change that I wanted to see if it works, or if it works well. And that would be change from 10% blade to 10% pierce. And that does... I mean, I can basically skip Drakes because I can't imagine Ghoul being used there ever, or a lot, or being a good pick. Versus Dwarf, that doesn't change much. Honestly, versus Dwarf I do prefer if Ghoul retains 10% Blade. Versus like Spearman, versus like, I mean Loyalists, not Spearman. Versus like Loyalists. I mean the counters are still there, however they are slightly weaker. But just slightly. Versus Orcs it actually makes Grunt kind of better counter, however it removes the Archer as a counter. Archer actually kind of is not great against Ghoul now. It was close before, it's kind of not great now. However, it makes Wolf Rider kind of decent. So that's something, right? However, overall I do think that I prefer that to be at Pierce. I mean at Blade. So I would just like not change that. I think I forgot to... Yeah, I didn't talk yet about elves. And the elves are... I mean, fighter is stronger counter, archer is weaker counter. They still beat Ghoul, right? They still do. So overall I think I do prefer if the blade damage would... blade resistance would stay there. The only place where it is somewhat curious is probably against Dune Folk, but yeah, I don't think they need that either. However, going forward to like loyalists and how this matchup currently works. Basically, I beat skeletons and nothing less. Like, yeah. Right now with the change Ghoul, because I really like change. The Dark Adept is there, but isn't a phenomenal pick compared to other factions. There obviously is Horseman, who is very annoying and actually does deal with most units well. Overall, I do think that this matchup is kind of fine for loyalists if if you are expecting to fight undead, you should win as loyalists, in my opinion. You can get the roster of units that will be strong against what undead can do, right? The mage is obviously the key in this matchup, beating basically most of the units that you need to get rid of. And then, like, you have the tools, let's just say you have the tools. You have the tools to deal with Dark Adept. You have the tools to deal with the skeletons. Perhaps even kind of too great. I mean, I see heavy infantry. It's very bad right now. I kind of want to rework heavy infantrymen. However, it won't be that easy. Because if heavy infantry is good, then basically loyalists destroy this match. Well, no, it would be kind of better because Ghoul, but still. Right? It is there, it is a problem. horseman is there, but I mean most of the loyalist units just fall into the category I'm defeated by skeletons, right? And then there are some units that counter the skeletons. So how it currently works, you just get mages. You can get like horsemen, you can get cavalrymen, you can get fencers, and that's basically it. However, all of them are quite fast, and that means that they are not primarily like combatants. So you have to rely on mage, and that's why with quite small changes you can see metas like spearman mage, because mage just clears away all the skeletons and spearman just like tonks skeletons and their cadets and everything else, while mage does the cleanup. However, mage also doesn't counter everything, because mage actually loses to Dark Adept in 1v1. So that's something. So in short, what I can see in this matchup, however that's from perspective of loyalists, is to simply increase a bit of cold resistance. For example, for Fencer. And Fencer should be somewhat alright there. Honestly, loyalists have immense shock value in this matchup. Very, very high. Very high shock value. However, most people don't play like that, right? They don't try to like intimidate their opponent into like making suboptimal plays, which they are good at, honestly. So yeah, I don't really have many comments about this. Certainly skeletons do great job in this matchup, and you need tools to deal with them. However, having infantryman is not great right now, and it does require changes. And after that, I have to make sure that loyalists aren't OP versus undead, basically. So I will leave this matchup for later when I actually get to the loyalist side and to the changing heavy infantryman. Versus orcs, honestly, undead do well. Interestingly, this is something that I learned years ago, where there was like question: are grunts actually countering skeletons? And honestly, depends. Early game, with the gold advantage they do. If they don't get gold advantage, they don't. That's the basic truth of this matchup. And then we have Troll. And before like gold changes, Ghost was honestly the only unit that was properly countering trolls. I know that, I mean, Adepts was the murder, and if you like focus fired on trolls, they would die. However, if there is like a line of trolls, and you can just like use 2 Adepts, and trolls are allowed to regenerate, and like, I don't know, go in and out of combat constantly, then trolls will take the matchup by a landslide. And this is basically what is happening. You see just trolls and archers. Archers counter ghosts, which are only like proper counter to, like, not even proper counter, because that will result in like epic stalemate of regeneration versus drain, where no unit can beat each other, right? Or it will take crazy long time, and by the time this happens, actually like ghost and troll will just be like replaced by another ghost or troll. So that's not really a fun way. So there is archer. And what happens with archer is that archer honestly pretty much beats most units that orcish archer beats most units undead have. There is an exception because like actually archer will lose to skeleton but by very small margin. Previously there was like ghoul would know without pierce resistance the ghoul will stack. And I do think that's for the better. So I feel like there is slight need for something else to like show up. Because the fire damage and the pierce damage does like do go forward and make quite tough combination to disarm most of the time, right? Pierce fire aren't fun to like deal with. Certainly. Well, basically that defeats everything at this point, which is something I didn't exactly expected, because previously probably would take that. Let's like think about it for a bit. Yeah, actually, like a ghoul with 10% in pierce resistance does take Orc Archer on. However, by then ghoul basically deals with everything except for grunt, and grunt is very easily counterable. So yeah. That's kind of a problem that I have to think about now, because like I don't really want one unit matchups basically, and here it kind of looks like that, where there is counter, but the counter is very very weak. And also the counter kind of requires not lore friendly decisions to be made, possibly. Because if I give ghoul that resistance, then ghoul beats pretty much everything except for grunt, and the grunt is easily counterable by undead. And if I don't, then archer beats everything, and very closely is beaten by skeleton. Very close. Which I won't lie, that's kind of problematic. And I really want to avoid like changing skeleton resistances or anything like that. BRB. Sorry, cats were fighting nearby, and I had to kind of do something about it. Alright, so thinking about this further, with 30% impact, Ghoul actually does deal with Troll. However, with 0% Pierce, Archer now counters Ghoul. And with 20% impact, Trolls actually should win against Ghoul. Right? However, with 10% Pierce, Archers should now do quite a bit worse against Ghoul, right? So, possibly the best solution here that I can come up with in this matchup, because like if I were to come back to like 30%, it probably wouldn't get much lower anyway. Right? Actually it does, actually no. Looking at the change in attack, it would kind of change a bit to be a bit better. That's why Elder was sometimes trolling people with going Ghoul, Mass Ghoul, and they were going Mass Archer and they were losing. Because like Archers actually do lose to Ghoul. Orcish Archers at least. With 30% Pierce. With 10% they still don't do great, however they do win. I mean Ghouls. Ghouls do win. At the same time, with 20% actually Trolls do deal with Ghouls, so that's also something. So the matchup stays kind of closer to the same as it was. However, now it's closer for Ghoul to actually fight with both of these units, right? So I guess I find that as something nice, right? Ghoul is now more viable there. Question is, how does that affect other matchups now? Because like previously I actually, if I give Ghoul 30% impact with 10% melee parry, what will happen? Trolls lose to Ghoul, right? And then if I give them also 10% pierce damage reduction, then everything except for Grunt loses to Ghoul. Of course not in like a huge number. I mean, against this matchup you can actually go huge number because like Trolls and regeneration, etc. This kind of shenanigans. You can actually need more poison. Right? So that's something. However, then if I kill Ghoul as is, Archer wins with everything. So this change would actually be negative in my opinion. However, how will the Woos and the Elves react primarily, right? Well, Woos still would lose to Ghoul, which is good, which is something I want to happen. certainly. And Ghoul is also less vulnerable to like ranged units. Actually, that can work. I can see this working. I guess it's even good against like Dune Folk. However, I won't consider them much. However, what happens, although I won't even consider Loyalists again, because heavy infantry is something I would like to rework during this cycle. Next we have Dwarves. Well, there is less matchups to cover. Is there anything I would like to do from Dwarf perspective against Drakes? Technically, Dwarvish Fighter does win against these two. However, it's close. And yeah, at least he beats everything else. Actually, looking at this, I kind of start to think that dwarves are more vulnerable to like Saurians, with exception of like Griffon and Fighter and Wolf, than anything else. So basically, but that's still many units, right? This is like interesting matchup, certainly. What would happen if the War Fighter was actually kind of better against Fighter and Clasher? Which is again kind of hard duo to beat because both of them have different attack types. So mainly Pierce for Clasher, mainly Blade for Fighter. So they would basically need to have like different counter. And fortunately there is, and that's Poacher. Funnily enough, Poacher does do well. Actually no, Poacher doesn't even win versus them. Actually, I guess it would be good if Poacher could do that. If Poacher could like fight that. At least better find that. Honestly, I could trade some like XP perhaps for like stronger Poacher. Because Poacher body is weak. Poacher only thrives on level up. However, then I would need to also alter the level ups. That's something. And also Poacher doesn't really look like he has any resistances. So I guess just like again increasing body power. Just pure body power. Like what else can I even do with him? He was like buffed 3 times I believe in a row, or 2 times in a row by this point. That's kind of tough, exactly this kind of dilemma. 28. 28 XP. Because Poacher does have a lot of space for things that I could put on him. Right, Poacher does have that lacking gap in power that is currently replaced with XP, basically with strong level up. And that's basically the first thing why Poacher is even like half decent. Basically just playing for level up. On the other hand, the high HP also doesn't really suit this unit that much, because that would need to be like 36 at least, which maybe is not that high on the other hand. And then Poacher actually beats Drake, like whole Drake. And then you can actually, you have to like use Saurians to beat Poacher, and then like Griffons deal with everything but the fighter in Clash. And then that becomes like crazy complicated. Interestingly enough, that's actually quite interesting. I kind of like that. Honestly, I kind of like that. But that would come at a cost of fast level up, for sure. I can't keep them both. However, how would the Poacher actually do in other matchups now? Mainly like... It's still fine, Poacher still dies to Spearman. Hard counters Cavalryman would probably did that before. Still dies to Horseman, which is nice. So it's not like very big change. My god. Like Horseman is so oppressive in this matchup now that I look at it. Like really oppressive. On the other hand, like Spearman is also oppressive in this matchup, but not as much. Yeah, I will have to do something about it. For sure. Actually, I have an idea. I will see later on if it works. Okay, versus Orc. Poacher still loses to Grunt. Still loses to Whelp. Beats everything else though. But the important one is actually the Grunt. Even if Poacher wins, like Grunts just roll through them. Especially, like, actually Dwarves are better at keeping villages than Poachers anyway. So yeah. I mean, yeah. Like Dwarves were already better. Versus Elves not much changes, like Poacher isn't like top tier unit by any means. Maybe level up changes a bit, but that's about it. And Dunefolk actually that looks quite nice for Dunefolk, not gonna lie. So I might do that. That might be something to do. I guess that can work, because previously Poacher was balanced by simply having fast level up. Fast strong level up, and no part of that power comes back to the Poacher. So I kind of have to slow down the level up. My Poacher tank again. Oh well. Yeah, Poacher really doesn't do a lot of damage. But finally has like place, I guess. Yeah, I quite kind of like it. But what else? I already saw some other problems. Versus Undead, I already discussed that one. But is there anything I can do from like Face of the Wars to like supplement that? Yeah. Move still beats a lot. Oh. With good change footpath is less of a problem. Still slightly problem, but less of a problem right now. Still beating skeletons, still beating basically most of the other stuff. But mainly skeletons. The fighters still... I actually found something interesting slightly. I found something curious. Oh, nice. Another day, another interesting interaction. And that works. However, I didn't expect it at all. So going back to the train of thought that I had, if I even remember. Yeah, basically fighter beats everything except for ghost. In an ideal world there would be another unit that dwarf fighter doesn't actually beat. And there is also like another good counter to ghost. And then we can like talk about kind of bit more interesting matchup. But in this one, for now, I believe it will have to stay that way for some time, at least. And then we come to loyalists. And honestly, oh boy, that's a problem. Because perhaps I should write like short reasonings. Or I will do that later perhaps, because right now it will just like slow things down. But honestly, Dwarf versus Loyalist is the first matchup that is, in my opinion, not great. Like, really quite bad. Basically, Dwarvish Fighter is the closest thing that can fight with Spearman. And nothing else for miles. Basically, Spearman just dabs on everything here. And that's not the only unit that does that. There is also Horseman. And Horseman also wins. Kind of hard. Right? And then you have Mage, who basically forces all of the good defense targets that Horseman can. So you have like perfect base unit. And then perfect offensive unit on flat and perfect offensive unit against like hills and good defense. And honestly, if only dwarves were like able to deal with one of or two of them, it would probably be fine. Straight up. First idea is dwarf Thunder 30% pierce damage resistance. And that does do something. That does do quite a bit, honestly. However, now we get too close to the point where Thunder would actually dominate the matchup. That's just 10%, but that's how it is. There is like Horseman still beats the Thunderer, however not by much. And Spearman is beaten by Thunderer, also not by much. I guess you could say that's like close to perfect. However, then comes Bowman, who is not very big fan of the idea. Fencer, who also wasn't like super great in the matchup. It's decent. It does help in many circumstances, like versus Wolf. However, still not great. Then we have like Mage, who was already not great versus Thunder, but you had Horseman. Right? So overall it's interesting change. It is almost like great. However, again I will repeat myself, right now, after that change, basically Thunder becomes the go-to unit. And I don't necessarily like that, honestly. That's a good idea, however a bit too strong. And if we go from 30% to 20 and then try this with like poacher with 10%, let's see. Let's think about it. Poacher will be better, but it won't beat like the archetype. The only realistic counter against loyalists was Thunder on a mountain, and basically that was still kind of good for horsemen. And that's it. Yeah, I find that funny. That's in order to like beat a faction, you basically have to sit on very high defense and like not even 60%, you have to be on 70%. Or you're not dealing with that, you're not going through that. However, that's still an idea. It can work out. We will see. And there is a bit of space on Thunder, so yeah, that could work out. However, I still like, before I'm waiting for the idea on heavy infantry marine rework. However, that would have probably very good synergy with it. Like, I will explain it later on. This kind of also has bad effect on, I guess, I mean, the Thunder is very good against Drake. However, that might actually push him again a bit too much against a real skirmisher. And that would be already a problem, right? I mean, yeah, it's almost there. Insane. Ay, 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 ay. Funnily enough, that would be so anti-lore. I could literally go for 0% fire because the fire can ignite the black powder and explode into their space. And that's actually kind of interesting interaction, because with that, Borner is actually kind of slightly better against Dwarvish Thunderer, right? While being slightly better, slightly losing against Fighter and being slightly better against Thunderer. Alright. However, that's like extremely lore friendly change as well. However, honestly, I won't care for now about the lore, and later we will see how that works out. We will see. That's just it. I try to limit myself by lore when I can, however, I absolutely can't at this moment, because I will anyway throw this in like era, not exactly mainland just yet. So that's a thing. Alright, what's next? I will keep in mind that change. However, it has to be paired with this change. So that's something that can work out. We will see, we will see, we will see, we will see. I don't think it changes anything against like undead. Nah, it doesn't. What was bad is already bad, what was good is still good. Goal is still countered. But that's certainly something I want to do. I know that this is random unit, but like... boy. Oh, I could also try like 16 gold and see how that works. Probably not as well. Wait. I see. I see. Perhaps both. Perhaps both. I simply feel like... At 17 that wouldn't be enough, right? 16 plus the changes is actually making it quite different. What's next though? Orcs. And honestly, I don't feel like I have to do any changes here. Especially after Poacher buff. Well, buff and nerf. The change. It feels fine. It feels like Poacher will actually do kind of all-around job better than right now, and that should be enough. And then the turner like loses against what was losing before. Right? Fighter is much better. Doesn't gain anything like fancy new, maybe a bit better against Archer, but that's it. Nothing special. Then we look at elves, and that change I don't. Actually I should look at around for whole faction there. Probably. And here we see another problem. Mainly, Dwarvish Fighter is, in my opinion, beating Elvish Fighter on average, like including terrain, etc. And while elves kind of can push, Dwarvish Fighter is good enough that dwarves can actually, or rather elves can't actually easily push through them. In any way. So I would probably like to see some changes here. Especially... But there is another problem. Because Elvish Fighter is actually winning against everything except for Dwarvish Fighter. In my opinion again. So, if I happen to in any way nerf Dwarf Fighter, then elves could just do like Fighter plus Mage and that's it. That's the whole matchup. Right now, dwarves can basically do the same. Fighter plus nothing else, maybe like Wolf. Actually, like dwarves have many cooler support units, so that they can go with like some... But probably nothing is as good as pure Fighter plus Wolf. Which is funny. So yeah... There's something needs to be done about this matchup. However, there are at least two changes for two separate factions, basically. Otherwise, there is no sense in touching even this. So yeah. At least two changes. One that would make it so that at least one other unit of dwarves counters Fighter. And there I don't see any potential candidates. Realistically, I don't. And the other is to make at least one Elvish unit additionally counter Dwarvish Fighter. Honestly, it can be solved with just actually making some other Elvish unit counter Dwarvish Fighter. And no, Woos does not do that. Mages don't actually do that well. At least current mages. I also plan to remove them, so that's something. perhaps could help with this. Actually, I should treat the mages as two separate entities for loyalists and rebels anyway. However, other than that, like, there are not many choices. Realistically. What I can see is like giving Archer like 10% blade rest and see what that does. However, that's already for elves. I don't really see any changes on the dwarf side that I could have made to actually like deal with that. And then we have Dunefolk just very briefly. Like Soldier deals with the fighter, which is nice. And I guess then Soldier kind of does go forward and basically takes lives of everyone. I'm not gonna be even kidding, like, Soldier does dominate this matchup in my opinion, and something has to be done about this, and it will be done. However, Dunefolk are separate again. And then we have Loyalists. And Loyalists... Heavy Infantryman. There are a few ideas. I think I like this one the most. Not this one. That's the basic. That's the basic thing. However, I don't know if it will stay that way. And, yeah, that's important. And I probably need to do more. Because that's not enough. And high like that still loses to Drake Fighter and Derek Ryan. Actually, I don't know if still, but should lose to Fighter and Clasher. Should lose. Actually, no, it should win. Yeah, that's reverse. 10%, minus 10% melee, 10%. Yeah, so like high wins against the Drakes, but wins way less. Actually, I keep confusing this back and forth. High still loses to Drakes, all Drakes, and still is beaten by Saurians. It still is beating Saurians. Constantly confusing. I have to like get it right in my mind. Still losing, still beating. And then that's basically perfect. That's basically perfect. Reflection of Spearman who wins and loses. And then we have Cavalryman who does lose against like most things except for Argur and Glider, and then Moman who is like pretty average in every category, like doing... Actually, that's basically kind of... I mean... Yeah, I don't really like Moman here, to be honest. Doesn't do a phenomenal job, I think. Hmm. Yeah, coming back to high. It still beats skeletons. Also definitely not 17 gold, not 19 gold, 17. Probably better. Or rather, if I want to see it being used, it should be around that. I should honestly like probably aim for 19 or something. No. Realistically. However, that's the problem with like expensive 5 MB units, right? Because they will quickly become very dominant. Quickly. I mean, there is technical counter of Ghost, but not really. I mean, actually it's better counter than it was before, because melee parry lower equals more Leech. Or Drain. And Dark Adept is still kind of good. And the Ghoul is, with these stats, quite a bit more solid than it was. So that's something to remember. Actually. So that can work out. Interesting. Very interesting. It can shift basically everything. Very, very interesting. And then we have the Dwarf. And in Dwarf, high dice 2 fighter. And that is how it should be. That's exactly how it should be. What if we don't do that? No. That actually makes sense. Quite a bit of it. Steam Speedrun is quite problematic. So nonetheless I would probably need to make at least one unit out of that dwarf roster to actually be able to beat Spearman, and then make one unit out of the Loyalist roster be able to beat Fighter. And the problem is that with this configuration, High is actually meeting everything except for Fighter. And if we go reverse, so 10% melee minus 10% range, how would that look on it? Well, certainly High is now more divided between ranged and melee. Goal still beats it now. Oh yeah, that would need to be at least minus 20 ranged. And then technically footpad would do something there. Technically. Poucher gets better. Thunder is almost there. So that's something to keep in mind. Something that is possibly actually quite good. Or with the high, if we do it like this. And then I also don't need this possibly simpler solution, honestly. Because no Thunder should deal with heavy infantrymen. How about Mirror in this case? Yeah, High beats everyone. Literally. Which is not good. It will end up in this high spam. Unless I do something about it. How is Arc? Yeah, High is actually beaten by Architecture, so that's good. And Troll is kind of close as well. However, heavy infantryman in this form is essentially beating everything else. Honestly, perhaps at this point I would be better off without heavy infantryman. Straight up. Straight up. Something like infantryman or something. Honestly, that's kind of the problem. The oppressiveness factor of this unit. Having such high resistance against very common damage types. Like, Soldier is basically high light right now. And I can say that's good. Right? Oh well. It's a tough question, honestly. Where is heavy infantryman needed the most? Not versus elves, certainly not. Not really versus orcs. We usually play without it. In mirror matchup, yes. Versus dwarves, I don't think it is needed. Versus drakes, absolutely not. Versus undead, kinda. So yeah. I will have to think if I even want to have it. Do I even want it? That's the question. Then orcs, elves, and Dunfolk. Honestly, we basically discussed most of the things already. From the side of one that already done most of the stuff I would want. From the side of like drakes. I honestly don't see much. Versus on that, I guess, like. I changed the goal and that already improved the situation, I guess, by quite a bit. Honestly, I like this matchup like that. Quite a bit. It's just right. Oh, well, we'll see how that works out. At this point, I don't think they need many changes or any changes against lists as well. Mirror does need some changes, but not for now. And then I don't really care about youthful. Honestly, the probably biggest problem for me is like orcs versus elves, where literally we run into the same problem we run like 3 times already, where elvish fighter again only does deal with everything sufficiently good, so we can just spam him. And one unit gameplay isn't particularly exciting, I guess. Then we have elves. For elves we went through nearly every matchup already. And we again drop into a trap of over-reliance on fighter. Literal. Because fighter loses, faction loses. Fighter wins, faction wins. Nothing else matters except who's sometimes. It's annoying. That's why this is my most disliked faction, honestly. That's why I really dislike them. Really, really, really. Honestly, I really like this gun improvement, looking through the units and thinking about everything. That gun improvement looks juicy. Truly, truly juicy. It honestly does exactly what I would hope for. Hopefully in practice it will be similar. Dwarf's not very exciting. Basically, fighter has to get like 10% blade or something. That will affect so many different matchups. This faction is so bad. Literally relying so hard on one unit. That's a literal over reliance on fighter. Straight up. And it's so stupid as well. Like, you either win because like you have fighter, or you win because you have like 3 moves. Nothing else. Nothing else. Simply annoying. Even mirror isn't different. Like, oh my. How does like mirror of elves could look like? Fighter versus fighter. Both sides just spam fighter. You can get mage. You don't even want Woods. I don't think so. Because Woods will die to fighters. The only unit in its own faction is still dying. So bad. So bad. And then Dunfolk experiences the same thing, so fighter loses, the faction loses. That's it. Literally. You literally like use other units for like variety except for mage, who is sometimes useful, and fish because water, but not every map has water. I feel like I'm making this round for like 3rd time in my life. And then we have Dunfolk. And Dunfolk will have some pretty big changes, I guess. However, again, like Dune Folk won't actually be like Dune Folk are balanced over all the other changes and factions, not with them. Also, why is that? Why is there that over-reliance? There is no resistances anywhere except for the tree. That's also quite good. However, that might not even be necessary if I remove like high. Because like impact resistance on Tundra is like free stat, in the sense that that unit already will anyway lose to the units with impact damage, because basically all of them have good pierce resistance anyway, and are basically countered to defeat it, like trolls or are not even used, because versus dwarf you don't even really use trolls, but you do sometimes mooses. But in any case, the only place where this resistance would actually come to play would be against loyalists. There aren't many impact units in the game. It's like Woos on level 1. There's literally like Woos, Troll Whelp, Heavy Infantryman, Foot, but it's from mirrors, so that doesn't matter, and then there's some units in Dune Folk, and that's it. And I don't even consider Dune Folk here. So, like, impact resistance for Thunder technically exists only versus Age. Hey, interesting, isn't it? Very interesting. However, those create a need for another change, or a few. However, that decreases complexity a bit, so pluses and minuses. And that already allows at least Drakes to have straightforward counter, which becomes Burner I can even give him like minus 10% fire risk. And then we have like undead. And that's slightly not enough from what I think as well. Like, the only counter to Burner in undead is skeleton, realistically. What else? Ghoul is close, but not yet there. Right? Ghoul is close, technically. But like Archer, no. Adept is fine, I guess. Especially after the cold rest removal. What possibly else? I mean, it is like kind of winning, but not exactly winning against Skeleton. That's super close. And then like technically Skeleton has a Valkyrie counter anyway. Interestingly enough. Which is doing her best. But you can spam him, so like that's 50-50. It's kind of funny that Herbalist actually found like praise to be in, however small. I could give him like 10% fight, like physical rest. To Blade. Kirk. Yeah. Rider is fine. Rover is actually kind of useful. Somewhat. Honestly, it would be kind of funnier if Ghoul was the tank for Burner, but I can't see it. Because I would need to increase Ghoul fire res, and that would change too many matchups. Not something I want to do. It isn't far, but still. Okay, but how about the other factions here? Right. It's kind of still not that interesting. Cool. That's actually enough. That's nice. 10-20-10. That's Fran's choice now. Oh, that's fun. Because of the ranged penalty in parry, Shaman is kind of now counter to Soldier. Because you can hit it better. Unfortunately, in like Mirror, it's still kind of Soldier dominated. But that can be worked out. Overall, that's nice improvement, generally speaking. Alright, I guess that will be it for today. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you next time. Cheers!